Hey guys, Tyler Williams with Maple Mountain here, bringing you another board game review. This time we're going to be looking at the new expansion for Twilight Imperium 4th Edition from Fantasy Flight Games, Thunder's Edge. Now this expansion comes packed with everything that you know and love from a TI4 expansion, a little bit added to the old, the things that we know and love, and a whole lot of new mechanics, new additions or modules you can add to your base game, and in this time, an entirely new way to play and experience TI4. There's a lot of good to be had here, so I'm really excited to showcase it and show it to you guys. So let's get to the table and check out the Thunder's Edge expansion for TI4. Welcome to Twilight Imperium Thunder's Edge expansion for 4th edition. Now, this expansion has a ton of content into it, and as I mentioned, I kind of played this with some buddies recently and got a lot of hands-on experience with the subject matter here. There's so much to talk through. We're going to kind of take it in modular bites. There's a lot added in here, but we have the neutral units, the Fracture and the Thunder's Edge exploration event that plug in really seamlessly with any game of TI4, and I think add a lot of great content. We have the events module, as well as faction guides, new factions, and an entirely new way to play and experience TI4 with entirely new strategy tiles, command counters, modules for tech, all kinds of content added in here with these asymmetric and very specific factions unique to this module or style of gameplay. There's a lot of great content here. So we're going to jump in and take it bite by bite and talk about each piece and what you can expect to find and experience if you add Thunder's Edge to your TI4 experience. The first, what we'll call modular add-on from Thunder's Edge, is the Fracture and the Thunder's Edge Planetary Exploration Adventure. So these guys kind of work in tandem. I do see a world in which you could use one or the other or both, but really if you're going to use Thunder's Edge, you need to have the Fracture. So the way this works, this is Thunder's Edge, and if you can see here, it is a legendary planet, has some amazing production value, and of course has a legendary planet ability with it. But when it starts the game, this guy is not, we don't know where it's at. He's off to the side of the board with his exploration side face up. And what players can do is at the end of their turn, they can always choose to do one of these actions if they can afford to do it, adding their little flag token in that area to lay claim to that slice of the pie. Each of these things are payments that you'll have to do to help begin the search for Thunder's Edge. So those would be discarding a secret objective, exhausting a planet with a tech specialty, spending 3 trade goods, spending 5 production, spending 2 action cards, discarding them, or spending 5 political influence from planets, all going specifically towards this action. I can't use these for something else and count it. Has to go here. You can only do 1 at the end of each of your turns, and once someone has claimed something, you cannot do that one again and mark it. So once someone has done this, there's a couple interesting things that will occur. The first thing that they'll do is they'll put their flag here. They will claim their breakthrough technology, which we'll talk more about when we look at factions, but breakthrough techs are unique faction-specific technologies that usually give you a very powerful passive and active ability. They're very helpful, and they also have some additional hybridizations for how you can research other tech. So they are very helpful, and they're something that you're going to want to have for your faction, especially late game. Now, when this all fills up, the player who placed the last thing in here will have discovered Thunder's Edge. Now, they'll get to determine where this planet goes. Now, whoever had the most of these will get resources, troops on the planet equal to the number of charts on the pie. So say they had 3 tabs here and they had the majority, they would control Thunder's Edge with 3 troops, 3 infantry on that planet. But the placement would go to the person who placed last. So of course, if you place the most and last, you get all the control. But this is a really powerful planet. It will drop into the map following some specific rules and is again a very valuable resource. So it's worth the effort from just getting your technology alone, but it also can be worth it just to know where this planet is going to be and have a staked claim in this. And this happens usually about mid to late game, and it is very helpful. Now, how does this tie in with the Fracture? Every time someone does one of these and places on here, there is a chance the Fracture will spawn. You're going to roll the combat die, and if you roll a 1 or a 10, so you've got, your 20% chance, you will then spawn the Fracture. And the Fracture spawns in at the edge of the map, and the player who spawned it gets to determine where it goes. Now, here's the thing. This Fracture is not movable in normal means. I can't just move from adjacency into this region. It is kind of an alternate pocket dimension, if you will, that is hidden. And it has these ingress and egress tokens on it. And it's going to place and fall in alongside the board. And then the player who discovered it through the dice roll or whatever mechanism they use to discover the Fracture will place some tokens following some specific rules around the planet. Those tokens will allow you to teleport into these ingress little spots here on the board, and then you'll be able to navigate through this fracture to some of these planets. There's 4 unique planets here, all of which are pretty valuable just for their innate resources, but you'll notice that each one of them also will grant you a relic when you go there. So they are incredibly powerful and will give you obviously a lot of bang for your buck if you can get in here. Now, taking these is not as easy as just walloping in here and landing your troops. Each of these items is defended by neutral units. And so when this spawns in, we'll spawn using the neutral gray unit pieces, those troops on these planets. Each of them effectively act as the level 2 version of whatever that unit is. Now, there's a cheat sheet that walks you through those neutral units, but effectively they work overall as the level 2 standard tech upgraded version of anybody's faction unit. So there's a lot of troops here that can be working against you to protect those planets. But if you take them over, of course, you gain incredibly valuable resources, goods, and relics. You'll notice that Styx, the main planet here, has, again, a whopping production value. It is a legendary planet and gives you a relic. So it is definitely worth the struggle to get in there and claim that if you are able. These add in, pretty seamlessly to any game of TI4, and there are other ways to spawn the fracture. There's a specific faction that we'll call out that does a lot of nonsense in here as well. So there are some other ways as well, but predominantly it's going to come into your game most likely through the Thunder's Edge research. And once this guy's discovered, of course, he goes face up. So that's the first module. Let's go ahead and jump in then and talk about the next, which is going to be the events module that kicks off a game and gives it more asymmetry. Here's the piece that I think all of us are going to be most ecstatic about, which of course is additional factions added to TI4. Now we know and trust that every version and expansion of TI is going to add more and more factions to this already insanely deep deck of cards you can choose from to play. Every faction is insanely unique and asymmetric. I'll offer my thoughts on the new ones here in just a second. But speaking of factions, you'll notice fanned out here, we come with now kind of a cheat sheet card for each and every faction in the game, which again, I love when you look at this fanned out, just how many times you could play this game. I mean, the amount of replayability in TI is just mind-boggling, honestly, based on the time investment alone. But when you think about how many times you could experience the game in entirely new ways, and then factoring in who you're competing with, it's crazy. But these are cheat sheets that you can use based on the players in play. You can shuffle them and deal them out to make it easier for people to pick the faction they want to be if you're kind of going quicker that way. You can also have them in play so people can reference them a lot more quickly to know what they're dealing with and who they're dealing with. So you're not kind of like giving away information of like, ooh, can I see exactly how your dreadnought hits? Oh, don't mind me, I'm just curious. So these can be really helpful for that as well. And these can help get you set up with your starting text and everything you need kind of in a nutshell. So great little quality of life add-on here. But here we have the new factions. Now, there are 6 new factions. And you might say, Tyler, there's 7 pieces here. That is correct. These are actually one faction together, and they're really cool. So running down through these guys, we'll save the best for last here. You have the Rahl-Nell Consortium, which you can't see them very well, but it's basically if the Geico lizard, insurance lizard, went a little crazy. He might have done a few mutagens from, Spider-Man or something, but it is a full lizard-based society, and they do crazy lizard-based things. They have some really cool transportation abilities where they can use their destroyers even to transport PDSs around the planets and around the galaxy and shoot them while they carry them. So they've just duct taped a cannon on their destroyer and now have a super destroyer. Really cool stuff. They've got some awesome abilities to retreat and position battles that are really advantageous to them. Really fun to see them in play. Deep Rot Solitari, or Scholarit, excuse me. The Deep Rot are basically an offshoot of the Jolnar, literally, by the lore. They love to coexist with other factions and study them. So that's their big shtick, is coexistence, a new mechanic that's added in Thunder's Edge. They can basically, if you with a little finagling, live with and cohabitate planets with other people's infantry and mechs and things. That other faction actually gets to keep control of that planet for all purposes, as far as like spending the resources and things. But the Deep Rot get to have little labs. Those labs give them resources and influence values, and they can do some other shenanigans by having cohabitation with other people. They have a lot of really cool what would we call it, like political incentives to be their friend. They can help you dodge and skip technology requirements. They can give you technology. Of course, none of this comes for free. They gain benefits, usually the same tech that you research for free. They may gain resources and different things, but they are a really cool political faction that leans into some of the aspects of TI that I love the most, which is the table negotiation and manipulation of the board state through means other than direct combat. Speaking of political factions, the Council Kelleris, which you may know if you're a big TI buff, is actually a fan-made faction that's now been officialized. This is a really cool faction that utilizes parts and components from several factions together. You're going to look at the factions after everybody else, and those that haven't been picked will become, some of them may become your agents and heroes and things like that for this particular faction. They have a lot of really interesting abilities to manipulate laws and political effects. They can negate laws, effects for themselves or other players. They do some really cool guild kind of Starfleet feely kind of things, and they're really fun. I would like to play them more because that's kind of my playstyle for sure. Last Bastion, these guys are really cool and utilize another new mechanic we'll talk about in a second. They start with a trade post, which is like a space station linked to a planet, which allows them to trade with everyone from the start of the game without being neighbors, which is huge. They have some really good ground infantry abilities when they take over planets. They're readied right away, so they can use them the same turn. They have a lot of fleet-based things, kind of feel like the Federation of Sol, but desperate. So they've got some really interesting pieces. So if you love ground-based factions that do a lot of control of planets and really can entrench themselves, these guys are definitely one that you'll want to check out. Number next, the Crimson Rebellion, or the Angry Ghosts that use wormholes. So the Crimson Rebellion were the faction that I played most recently. These guys are wild. So they utilize rifts, unique to them, not wormholes. They actually can't use wormholes. They don't like them. They come from another dimension, and they're very, very angry. They are built all around their destroyers, which is a theme that I noticed here, is that these factions lean more heavily into asymmetric faction abilities for their destroyers specifically, because I think destroyers, with the exception of like the Argent Flight having a really, really strong destroyer, a lot of the factions' destroyers are very weak. They just don't do a lot. Oh, and the Yin Brotherhood's destroyers, but that's a whole other thing. These guys have destroyers that whenever combat happens anywhere around them, regardless of if they're involved or not, they can start putting rifts onto the board, and these rifts allow for increased movement speed and adjacency for their unit. So they can literally pop up all around the board. Something that I did is I was using PDSs to shoot through rifts for adjacency, holding a lot of the board hostage with tons of PDS fire. Their flagship is one of the coolest, most busted flagships I've seen. They're all strong in their own way, of course, but the Quietus has an ability where if it's in a system with an active rift, anywhere else that there's active rifts, anywhere on the board, all enemy units of any type lose all of their printed abilities. So sustained damage, deep space cannon, anything like that just goes away just for this existing. Maybe not even in the fight that you're fighting, but if it's just in a rift, it adds that to an effect. And it is a very powerful debuff. These guys are super, super militant. They have a really cool ability for one of their heroes as well, their commander, excuse me. It is going to give you... what am I trying to say here? Commodities in which you can turn into trade goods every time a fight resolves, regardless of who is doing the fighting. So they're a very fun faction, especially in a higher player game where lots of little skirmishes are occurring. They can really create a lot of commodities for themselves super, super quickly. All right, now, again, best for last, the most interesting and unique faction I think that we've seen probably to date in TI, which is the Firmament, which will become the Obsidian. Now, again, if you're a lore guy like me, the lore is really cool here. The Firmament is literally like Doctors Without Borders. They are a good society, not a secret society. They just want to help the galaxy. They're people from all over different walks of life that have come together, and they want to make the world a better place, the universe a better place. And all is going really, really well until one of their leaders discovers an old sword that he thinks is a really cool artifact. Well, the sword might be possessed, and the sword is possessed and possesses their leader, who slowly kind of gets his hooks into everyone and corrupts them in making them into an evil, secret kind of Cthulhu-based society here. And the Firmament will become the Obsidian in the late game, and they become incredibly powerful based on how the player has utilized the Firmament's good intentions through trade and negotiation with other factions. So mechanically, what does this mean? Well, these dudes start off really basic. Their factions, their heroes, their commander, everything is unique to the Firmament and is not super special, strong, or stand out in any given way. They're just kind of an okay base faction. They do have some additional political cards that they can use for trade agreements with other factions, and they have a really interesting component called plot cards. As they interact with and use some of the mechanics unique to them, they can get plots connected to other players at the table, effectively mechanically being them getting their hooks in and being able to manipulate that faction for their benefit in some way. When the Firmament player decides, they can actually switch to become the Obsidian, which changes everything about them. They get entirely new heroes, commanders, agents. So if you had a hero that you exhausted as the firmament, don't worry, you get a new one as the obsidian that you can then use again. They have really strong abilities. The plots that they use will trigger, giving them additional resources, power, combat effects, the ability to manipulate other players' units on the board, all kinds of things. And they also will most likely, if it's not already out, open up the rift or the fraction, bringing in all of those additional spaces we talked about before for Thunder's Edge, and will gain a pretty strong combat buff against players in here. So late game, they might run through the fracture, gathering all of those relics and increasing their power. So very much a sleeper faction, one that is kind of meant to be, I think, a high skill requirement faction where you have to know how to get those plots out there and you have to know when to flip. If you wait too late, you won't be able to utilize your power enough. But of course, if you flip too early, the obsidian might not be strong enough and have its hooks in everyone enough with their marionette's ability to where they can utilize everything as effectively as possible. But these guys are incredibly fun, very unique. I've not seen anything quite like them in the game. And again, leans into one of my favorite aspects, which again is that like table negotiation, trade arrangements, all for your benefit late game. Speaking of factions, here is an example of those breakthrough techs. Now, we referenced those before as a thing that you can gain normally through investing in searching for Thunder's Edge through expenditures there. There are some other ways to gain these as well, but every faction, new or old, throughout TI4 now has a breakthrough tech. Breakthroughs are going to give you unique abilities, potentially actions that you can utilize to exhaust to do a particular action or ability, and they're all going to be duplicate techs or variable techs. So for instance, the Clan of Stars is a blue and red tech. So when you're researching tech, you can utilize this to count as a blue or a red when you're looking for tech exemption. So if you need to build that War Sun rather quickly, you can count this puppy as one of the reds that you need to keep moving forward. And again, you're not gaining this through the typical technology action. So it's a great way that you could get 2 or maybe even 3, sometimes even 4 technologies in one single round of TI4, which can feel great because there's now another way to kind of grow your faction and gain those tech symbols that you need to really get to those late game technologies earlier and faster. And speaking of new, of course we know that this expansion also brings with it new political agendas, new action cards, secret objectives, all the things that every expansion kind of adds and stacks in, and some of the new action cards are insanely wild, but they are very, very fun. The one new thing though that's added to just the general table as well is going to be 2 new features. We have a new anomaly that's called an entropic scar. The entropic scar is really cool. When you're in here or doing combat in here for any reason, you lose all of your printed unit upgrades or abilities. So again, sustained damage, anti-fighter barrage, all of those things would disappear. Bombardment, anything like that is gone and can't be used by anyone that's in the entropic scar. That alone makes it interesting and can be used very defensively or offensively based on how you play it out. The other really valuable and interesting thing about this entropic scar is if you have a ship in here at the status phase, so the end of the round, the status phase, you can use a strategic token from your strategy pool, and you can actually research tech using that entropic scar. So it's a way to actually gain faction tech as well, just by having a ship in there. So this is a really highly fought after anomaly if it comes into play, because not only is it powerful for its positioning and the defense and offense it allows, it also is a way to gain technology, which we of course know is the lifeblood of any late game strategy build in TI4. Next, we have what I mentioned before, which were these stations. Now, this is the home system for the last bastion. You'll notice they have a legendary planet with no resources because they've extinguished and exhausted their world, but they start with a trade station, the Revelation. Now, these stations, they can also appear on just general planet tiles, so there could be many of them in play, and they're always linked to a planet. And the interesting thing about them is they're going to be based on who controls the planet. If you control the planet, you control the station, so you only need to have troops on the planet to also have the station. And of course, not every one is like this. A lot of times the planet has its own value, so it's kind of a 2-for-1 deal in that regard as far as control of a region. Now, if enemy ships are in this region for any reason, that instantly blockades your station, and you would lose the ability to utilize it for resources and things like that, which of course can be a negative. The positives of having these stations, though, is that you'll notice this little symbol over here that increases your commodity value by +1 for every station you control. So if I had one of these and my commodity was 2, my commodity max is now 3. So you can see this can be a great way to buff those high commodity factions automatically to give them a serious edge when it comes to trade and being able to generate a lot of trade goods. Now also, of course, these allow you to trade with anyone who has another station regardless of distance. So if my neighbor across the board that I'd never probably reach until endgame is now right next to me if they have a station as well, and we can engage in early trade. And that can also be really valuable for opening up those political agreements. All right, guys, and if all of that was not enough content to merit getting this expansion, there is an entirely additional new way to play called Twilight's Fall. Twilight's Fall is aimed at advanced players of TI4 and adds in an entirely new way to experience Twilight Imperium. This is going to give you new factions to play, these kind of entities or shards of a god. This is set in kind of an alternate end timeline of the universe where these kind of divine entities are fighting and ripping the galaxy apart. But they're going to come in and be entirely new, very asymmetric with crazy, crazy new abilities. You'll notice we have entirely new strategy tiles. They change the game very, very much. There are new items, cards. All the cards are new. There are new abilities that actually modify your faction at its core. There are unit upgrades that you can use, entirely new unit upgrades. So not just like, oh, I have my Destroyer 2. It's, oh, I put a card on, my cruiser now has a cost of +2, but the combat is a 4 and the move is +1. You know, unique options for everything. So if you want to make your destroyer hit like a truck, you can. So it's not just linear upgrades for your units. You can actually modify every point of cost or value on a unit based on these upgrades that you choose to put into play. From combat to move to capacity, whatever you want to do, you can make basically custom asymmetric units. There's also genomes, which are going to be basically unique action cards that you can utilize that are very, very powerful. There's paradigyms that you gain through different strategy cards and potentially different genome cards, and they're basically one-off actions that are really powerful that are purged from the game. So there's a lot of advanced content in here. Basically everything is new. There's new laws for edicts. There's splices where you can actually modify things together. This game is like I said, it's basically they said, hey, if you think TI4 is too light and you've got it down to a science, this is a way to make it entirely new. This feels very much basically like a new game. Like, yes, we're using some components and ideology from the base game, but it looks and functions and plays super different. The way that things work, like you're not able to say like, oh, the Saint of Swords, oh, they're a combat faction, so I better get warfare, and I better. Everything is entirely different. Even how these guys interact with each other, there's some similar vibes, but overall, the game plays incredibly, incredibly different, and these guys all shake up the game in their own unique and powerful ways. So there's a lot of fun to be had with this as well. I can't fathom getting a group committed enough to play this religiously, even though we still have so much to discover on base TI4. But I really genuinely love that Fantasy Flight put this in and added even additional value to an expansion that I think is already brimming with content and options. And that, in a nutshell, is everything that you need to know to jump in and have a really good time with Twilight Imperium Thunder's Edge expansion. Now, I always joke when I say it in a nutshell, because that felt like a whole bag of peanuts, right? Like there's just so much content to it. This was a great thing. I'm so glad Fantasy gave it to us to review. I love TI4. I say this a lot. TI3 was one of the very first real board games I got into. I skipped Ticket to Ride and Catan and all those things and jumped right in on the deep end of TI3, played it a ton in college with my friends, and just fell in love with board gaming and really built my hobby kind of backwards from there. And so Twilight Imperium has a special place in my heart just automatically, but I've loved to see the game continue to evolve and grow and streamline and fix a lot of things. And Thunder's Edge is no expansion, no exception to that as an expansion. The new factions play really uniquely and interestingly. They stand on their own. They're not just copies of other things. I mentioned this before, but I really like that they focus on destroyers. I feel like destroyers are kind of a neglected, overlooked unit. There's a few edge cases where if like somebody's running a heavy fighter build, like maybe you run them to counter, but you never run destroyers for the sake of the destroyer. And that's not the case with these factions. At least two of them specifically use their destroyers as a primary piece, a focal point of their faction strategy. I think that's really cool. It's nice to see that prioritization go to, that kind of a thing. And that's really fun. The rule books, again, are super clean and clear. There's one for all of the other things, and then one just for the Twilight's Fall, which is the new faction thing that we talked about. And they're that is complicated. That is a lot of content there, but it's, again, laid out very well and enjoyable. There's so much packed into this just from the new cards and tokens and strategies and tiles. You're not going to be disappointed with this one. Now, I know it's a little bit pricier than Prophecy was, all things considered, but the content added is wildly valuable, I think. So I think there's a ton here. You could argue this is enough to be a full game on its own, and everything that I played was really, really fun. Thunder's Edge just gives you something else to do with your resources while playing into your faction-specific tech. Those breakthroughs, that's super, super valuable. I really enjoyed seeing those come to play. I think that just gives technology more flexibility. Technology always kind of was very linear. Very rarely did you see people deviating from those general strategies of like, do I go heavy production build? Do I go heavy ground build? Do I go heavy combat PDS build? There's just some linear paths, right? And so the breakthroughs and things allow a little more flexibility there. So I like that. And then, of course, adding in the fracture is fun because it's just AI to fight, which can be nice depending on your table. And hunting down relics is always valuable, always powerful. So really cool stuff, all packed into one awesome game box. So do I think this is an amazing expansion? Absolutely. Do I think you should get it? If you like TI4, you definitely should get it. But I hope this review gave you an idea of what's in there, what's in the box, what to expect when you jump in, and what things might be interesting to you, what you might not utilize in every game. But I hope it gave you a good peek at what you'd be picking up and what your money is going towards. But yeah, I want to thank you guys for coming to Meeple Mountain for a board game review. I hope you'll continue to do so. Let us know what you want to see reviewed in the comments. We're always looking to review new things and add more content to our reviews. So let us know what you'd like to see reviewed next. And as always, thanks for checking out this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Check out these links to find some other games you might want to bring to the table. This is Tyler Williams, signing off.